Good afternoon, Grace Community Church. Welcome back to Daily Devotionals. Pastor Billy here with you. And today we're going to pick up right where we left off yesterday. John chapter 18, verses 15 through 27 today. Remember yesterday, Jesus was arrested. They came and arrested him, and Peter pulled out a sword, cut off Malchus's ear, and Jesus said, "Put your sword away." And we talked about that yesterday. Today we're going to pick it up from there. Verse 15, Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus because this disciple was known to the high priest. He went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, but Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" she asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter also was standing with them, warming himself. Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teachings. "I have spoke openly to the world," Jesus replied. "I always taught in synagogues or at the temple where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said." When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby slapped him in the face. "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" he demanded. "If I said something wrong," Jesus replied, "testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself, so they asked him, "You aren't one of his disciples too, are you?" He denied it, saying, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him, "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment, a rooster began to crow. So we see Jesus being arrested, and they're taking him to the high priest. And we see here Peter's first denial of Jesus when he's asked if he's also one of the man's disciples, and he says, "I am not." And then we see Jesus, he's being questioned about his teachings, and he doesn't defend himself at all. He doesn't defend his teachings. He's pretty much said, "I've been speaking openly. It was there. Some of them heard it already." He wasn't defending it in any way. He said, "Ask somebody else who's heard it." He won't defend himself in this moment. He's just sitting there, an innocent man who's done nothing wrong, refusing to defend himself and against his accusers. And then we go back to Peter denying Jesus, denying that he is one of Jesus' disciples two more times, all in total 3 times. Peter denies that he was one of Jesus' disciples, just as Jesus said a few chapters back Peter would, when Peter made the statement that, "I'll follow you wherever you go, Jesus, even to death." And Jesus looked at him and said, "Will you really?" And he told him, "I tell you the truth, before the rooster crows 3 times, you will deny me." And right after Peter's third denial, he heard a rooster begin to crow. And so this is one of those moments where, it's almost sad when you see Peter, and Peter, we see a story unfold from Jesus calling him to be one of his disciples, as he's a fisherman, and Jesus telling him, "I'll make you a fisher of men." And we see this point where Jesus is arrested and Peter denies him. And today's takeaway is Peter denied Jesus out of fear and comfort. When you look at it, he was afraid of what would happen to him. I mean, Jesus had been arrested. Peter was afraid. Let's be honest. That's what it was. He was afraid, and I think the comfort. It was uncomfortable to say he was a follower of Jesus in that moment because people were against Jesus, and those are 2 dangers for us as believers. That fear and comfort. Those two things. The being afraid will make us deny Jesus when we're afraid of what people are think. And comfort goes with that, right? Wanting to be comfortable. I used to, as a youth pastor for years, I used to talk so often to our youth students about this because, they would come to church, come to youth group, but, they would be afraid to come to the campus ministry when we had our Christian clubs going on. They would be afraid to show up sometimes because of, comfort, because of fear of what people would say about them if they were going to that club. And this is a real thing. It's not just with teenagers, it's with adults as well. Sometimes we can be afraid to acknowledge that we're a follower of Jesus in our workplace. We can be afraid to do that in our families even. Family get-togethers, we're afraid to acknowledge that and the desire to fit in. And so my encouragement to you, church, is don't be afraid of admitting you're a follower of Jesus. Be proud. Don't be ashamed of it. Let's learn from Peter in this mistake. He made a mistake, and we all do, and some of us have denied Jesus maybe before. Maybe we felt that pressure that Peter felt, and we've done that in certain situations. Here's the great thing about this was not the end of Peter's story. This was not the end of Peter's walk. It may have been the low, it may have been rock bottom for him, but he doesn't stay here, and we'll see that as we go on more. And we know Peter becomes a leader in the church. And so just because he made a mistake here and he denied Jesus 3 times, Jesus would go on to pay for that sin of denying Jesus. He would go on to pay the cost for that by going to the cross for Peter and for all of us and all of our mistakes. So takeaway today is don't deny Jesus. Don't be afraid to stand firm in our faith and say, I'm a follower of Jesus. I am a disciple of Jesus. He is my Lord and Savior. Church, God bless you. Have a great week, and we'll see you later.